All right, welcome to the first presentation in our series highlighting corn production for 2019. This is part of the series that we're conducting this year for the in replacement of the 2019 Corn College. We decided to do some web-based presentations to make it easier for clients to view and customers to view and corn producers in the region. Today we're pleased to visit with Dr. Jake Vossenkemper. He is with Twin States Incorporated that have several locations in Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And one of the things that I've asked Dr. Vossenkemper to visit with us today is about his research with organic acids for corn production. He's probably put together one of the most complete data sets that I've seen as far as evaluating some of these organic acids actually out on the field and not just in small plot research. So we'll go ahead and kick off this series, and Dr. Vossenkemper, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much. Appreciate the nice introduction there, Dr. Godsey. Well, this morning, as Dr. Godsey mentioned, we're going to have a little discussion regarding some organic acids for corn production, and I'll fill you in a little bit on some research that I've been conducting in actual field research trials, mainly in Iowa and Northwest Illinois. Before we kind of get into the details of the talk here, I just basically want to tell you that I've been doing practical production ag research, evaluating different crop management practices and products for the better part of 10 years now, and some of that was done at the university level. For example, I met Dr. Godsey when I was getting my master's degree at Oklahoma State. I've worked at DuPont Pioneer doing agronomy research with farmers as well as on their research farms. I spent a little bit of time at the University of Illinois doing lots of practical crop management research, and I've been here with Twin State Incorporated for about the last 4 years now. So, and at the current time, I lead our agronomy research efforts. And just to kind of fill you in a little bit, I keep saying Twin State Incorporated, but you might see Liquigro on a lot of the slides here. Twin State Incorporated is a business that owns several businesses. So Liquigro is a subsidiary of Twin State Incorporated. And the company was founded basically manufacturing fertilizer. We're a regional manufacturer of starter fertilizer, both in furrow and lots of 2x2 analysis products, as well as a grade of fertilizer called liquid suspension fertilizers. And we might talk a little bit more about that later because some of these liquid suspension fertilizers were involved in some of my studies. And I have a map here that just kind of shows you our area of influence just briefly. So we're heavily focused in Northeast Iowa and Northwest Illinois, with a couple locations in southern Wisconsin. And so I work with the fertilizer manufacturing division doing research with them, but I also work with our ag retail division, which is called Liquigro. So we're a fertilizer manufacturer, and a lot of that fertilizer is manufactured under the Twin State name, but we also are heavily invested in ag retail, and we have roughly 22 to 24 ag retail facilities, in addition to being a regional manufacturer of fertilizer. So that's enough about our business. Let's kind of move on to the presentation. Dr. Godsey, do you have any questions so far? Or?
No, I don't think so. It's good overview and kind of where your research was done, and I think let's go ahead and move on into discussing the organic acids.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yeah, so that's actually something I kind of glossed over. Uh, that is our area of operation, the Northwest Illinois, Eastern Iowa, and that is where all this research comes from. So that's definitely something I want the farmers and audience to keep in mind. So when you're thinking about the research that I discuss here, that's the geography where all this research was done. So, all right. So what are we gonna? I got a little bit of an overview here today of what we're gonna cover. So I want to talk a little bit about why I started investigating organic acids to begin with. And before we get any further, when I say organic acids, um, I'm referring to products called humic and fulvic acids. Okay. But the reason you're going to hear me say organic acids is oftentimes whenever you're working with one of these products, um, they're really usually not 100% humic or 100% fulvic acid. Usually they're a ratio of the two. So it's technically not appropriate to say humic or fulvic acid in many cases because in reality, these products aren't all one or the other. They're kind of a ratio of the two. So I've started calling them organic acids as a general term. I've heard others call them, reference them as organic acids, and in a lot of research papers, you'll see people reference them as organic acids whenever it's a ratio of the two products. So when I say organic acids, that's a term, a general term for humic and fulvic acids. So after we get done discussing why I started investigating organic acids, um, we're going to just briefly kind of discuss what exactly is an organic acid. What do I mean by that? After that, we'll discuss some of the findings from two sets of experiments. One that I'll say is complete, but the other is still ongoing. So the experiment that's complete was done in the 2017 growing season, and I have another ongoing experiment that we're going to look at. We're going to look at year one results from 2018.
I think that's a good point. The discussion on the organic acids. I think people use those interchangeably, and I think we probably do need to make an effort of like you said, generically call them an organic acids because I think it from a I hear salesmen referring to between humic and fulvic, and I'm not sure that there's a little misconception I think that goes on with those. So that's a good point to emphasize is that basically they're organic acids, in generically categorizing them as that is probably the best approach.
Yeah, yes, particularly when you don't know, and oftentimes, you look at these product labels, and I'm not so sure you can tell exactly, what fraction of the material is humic or fulvic acid. So exactly, that's why I've kind of started referring to them as organic acids. All right, so what is a humic fulvic acid? Okay, so in other words, what is an organic acid? I think before we kind of give you the definition of those materials, I think it's kind of important to understand that they basically originated from soil organic matter, and just simply put, soil organic matter is highly degraded crop residue, animals, insects, bacteria, fungi, anything that's alive and that is been degraded in soil processes is basically what we refer to as soil organic matter. Okay, humic substances is a general term used to describe a fraction of that soil organic matter that cannot be further degraded by soil microbes given their inherent complexity. So humic substances are basically what's left after soil microbes and fungi have used all the available energy that's in organic matter for their own cellular processes. So when all that's said and done, and they can no longer, whenever soil microbes can no longer use anything else on organic matter, um, that's basically what a humic substance is. It's what's left after bacterial and microbial, after bacterial and fungal um, microbes have done their work, basically. Okay. And then within humic substances, there are three different broad fractions of humic substances. There's fulvic acids, humic acids, and human. So humic substances, and there's three different broad fractions of those humic substances, and that's fulvic, humic acids, and human. So just a little more brief information about fulvic and humic acids. Um, just kind of generally want you to know that when you're talking about a fulvic acid, they tend to be light yellow to yellow brown. As you move toward the humic acids, they tend to be brown to gray to black. And then when you get in the human category, these materials tend to be all black. So as you go from fulvic acid to human, there's a general intensity in color. Um, there's an intensity in carbon content from fulvic to humic to human. Um, and I think another important point is there's a decrease in exchange acidity um, from fulvic to humic acids. So in other words, the fulvic acids have a higher net negative charge, and the humic acids have a little bit lower net negative charge. But and the charge associated with these humic and fulvic acids is actually one of the things, the net negative charge or the high negative charge is actually one of the things that make them somewhat attractable for potentially increasing crop yields. And that's something we're going to talk a little bit more about in this presentation. So kind of keep that in mind, that the extreme negative charge associated with these things is one of the reasons why people have measured some properties of humic and fulvic acids that make them attractive to at least evaluate in field research plots. And
So,
then finally, there's generally a decrease in solubility as you go from fulvic to humic acid. So it's harder and harder and harder it's harder to get humic acids to dissolve in a solution of water than it is fulvic acid. So I guess just keep that in mind.
so, so, Jake, do you think and you mentioned the increased exchange capacity, so the ability for that soil to retain nutrients, is probably the biggest thing, would you say, on that list, the biggest potential benefits?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, from a crop management perspective and from a soil fertility perspective, particularly, the exchange, the high net negative charge associated with these things is probably one of the more important factors in my mind from a soil fertility aspect that can potentially make them valuable to us. And it's not necessarily, it has to do with their ability to chelate nutrients in the soil. And I actually have a slide where we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
And yes, I do think that's one of the more important things that growers need to keep in mind when using these products. Yes, from a soil fertility perspective, of course.
Okay.
Okay, so I also think it's important just to review for a second, just how have organic acids been shown to increase um, potential plant productivity? There's many different properties that I often hear salesmen of these products talk about. Okay, um, some of the things that I hear folks talk about, I have read in science papers, and I would generally agree that there's a somewhat consistent consensus that these humic that these organic acids can do these things. But there's often other things that I think are overstated. Let's put it that way. I mean, for example, there's a lot of discussion I often hear. I hear people say that oh, if you use humic and fulvic acid, you can increase the soil's water holding capacity because this is a fraction of organic matter, and we know that as organic matter increases, generally so does water holding capacity, and that's true. But I also think you need to realize that the amount of this material we're applying in any given year is, for example, 48 ounces per acre was the amount of material that I applied in some of these trials you're going to look at. And the organic acid products that I used were 10 to about 2.5% humic and or fulvic acid. So the amount of material you're putting down probably isn't enough to affect the soil's ability to hold water. Um, so I think that's one claim that's, I think, way overstated and misused. Have you heard that, Dr. Godsey? Have you heard people say that about organic acids or humic and fulvic acids?
Yeah, definitely. It is just because of that, like you said, especially in our sands out here, that potential benefit of increasing the organic matter on water holding capacity. And yeah, when you do the math on yeah, exactly how much organic material you're adding. Like you said, it's like a drop of water in the ocean. So
Yeah, that's right. It's basically nothing. So while technically increasing soil organic matter would increase water holding capacity, we're just not putting enough of the stuff on to do that, in my mind. Okay, so what have I read and what have I actually seen in science papers that I believe organic acids can potentially do for plants? You'll often hear something called the acid growth theory discussed, and all that is basically it's an acidification of the rhizosphere, and that's the area where the root and soil intersects. And whenever you acidify the rhizosphere, people often see that root lengths are increased. Okay, so that's been observed in a number of papers that I read, and I think that that's um, generally probably the case. Um, Organic acids have also been shown to be strong chelators of cations in the soil. And essentially is what that means. Chelation is also a term that is very confusing to people, but um, in this case, when I say chelation, I'm basically talking about the ability of these organic acids to basically potentially strip nutrients off of soil that were not plant available and bring them into the soil solution and make them more plant available. And that's where that net negative charge, that high negative charge of these things comes into play. So, generally speaking, our natural soil has a charge from 5 at the low end from a cation exchange capacity point of view to maybe as much as 30, 35 in some extreme heavy clay cases. Um, these organic acids have net negative charges from I think we've seen 500 to 1500 back there on our slide. So they have a high affinity to attract cations in the soil, and they can actually bring um, plant mineral nutrients, cations, from places in the soil, basically between clay layers and that are on the edges of clays, and bring them into the soil solution and make them more plant available. Um, and there, I actually provided a YouTube video link here on the slide. Um, there's a soil scientist that explains this in very eloquent terms, I think. And you should watch that if you're more interested in this process and want to understand more how it works. And if you really want to, it's a 12-minute video, so it's kind of lengthy, and I kind of like watching that stuff. But if you want to spare yourself the details, just watch from 3:30 to 7:30 or so, and that pretty much breaks it down to what we care about from a crop production point of view, anyway. Um, any questions about that, Dr. Godsey, or does that make sense?
yeah, I don't think so. I think you did a pretty good job of explaining that. I think yeah, chelation gets used a lot in sales meetings, and I think it's not well understood or easy to conceptualize. So I think yeah, you did a good job of that, and I would encourage them to watch that short video because I have seen that as well, and it does a good job of explaining
Oh,
it.
excellent,
So
excellent, excellent, excellent. And I'm glad you've seen it. That's good. All right. So the other thing that I often hear salespeople talk about is the ability for these organic acids to do something that's called basically quench or reduce reactive oxygen species in plants, and that's often associated with foliar applications of these products. And I'll be quite honest with you, I have read that in several different papers, and it seems that that's kind of a proven benefit of foliar applied organic acids. But I'm not a technical expert on exactly the biochemical process of how that works. I believe that I've read that in a number of places, and there's probably something to that. But I'm not sure how strongly that's relatable to plant yield. But that's I often hear that, and I think there's some truth to that. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. Okay, so um, I wanted to take a few minutes here and talk about why I even became interested in investigating these products. Because before I decided to spend a good amount of time and, frankly, financial resources of our companies investigating these products, I wasn't very sure that this is even something we should consider looking at before I seen what I'm going to talk about here. Because I was aware of basically zero independent public information in the Corn Belt. And when I say that, I mean the eastern rain-fed Corn Belt, showing that any of these organic acids were something profitable that farmers should use. However, I did run across some information not too long ago that at least got me thinking that possibly I should spend some time thinking about these things. So the figure that's on this slide here basically comes from a paper that was published by a couple USDA ARS scientists out of Ames, Iowa, in 2013, and basically Dr. Dan Olk and Dana Dines with the USDA ARS out of Ames, Iowa, partnered with a company to basically evaluate their organic acid products. And somewhat surprisingly to me, they seen a rather large yield increase on average in corn. They did these on-farm evaluations for 3 years, and they ended up with about 35 different locations, according to the publication. Most of them were in Iowa. Some of these locations were in South Dakota. Most of them were in Iowa, and there was a few in Nebraska. But basically, they showed an 8.4% yield increase on average to using an organic acid that they evaluated. And while I was quite surprised of their findings, I have no reason to doubt it because they're paid by the public, and their job is to independently evaluate things like this and different crop management techniques. So I thought that I should take it seriously, and seriously enough that I should basically embark on some investigations on my own to try to decide if these are products that our company wants to sell. And that's my job, frankly. So when these next two figures also come from that research that was done by the USDA ARS folks, but they kind of break it down a little bit more and talk about some places where they've seen larger yield increases and talk about some places where they've seen smaller yield increases. And basically this trial here that we're looking at, this was done in 2012. And I'm not sure, Dr. Godsey, if it was extremely dry in western Nebraska and western Kansas and eastern Colorado in 2012. It's probably always extremely dry, but
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
it was very dry in Iowa relative to normal in 2012 for us. So this experiment that we're looking at here would be in an extremely dry year for us. Okay, and not only is this experiment set in a dry year, but basically they broke this down by some upland soils that have a soil organic matter concentration of about 3.5%, some side slope soils that are somewhat more eroded, but still obviously have a high soil organic matter concentration, and then a lowland soil which should have the highest soil organic matter concentration. And they looked at a couple different timings. So the green bar would be the check, so no humic or fulvic acid applied, and this red bar here would be a product that was applied foliarly at V4, and this blue bar is soil applied applications plus a foliar applied application. And so in the upland soils here in a dry year, they measured quite the yield increase. I mean, 30% with the V4 application alone, and up to 39.9% in the with the foliar plus the soil applied application. But it's interesting when they got into these higher organic matter soils, there was clearly less yield increase. and perhaps not even enough of a yield increase to pay for the product. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure if that's statistically significant. They didn't make mention of that in their presentation. And then when you get down here to the lowland soil, you kind of see a little bit of a yield increase again, particularly with the foliar applied application.
We are. I will make note that we are envious of the organic matter percentages, even in the upland soil.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine so. But that's somewhat routine in Iowa anyway. And I can see why you're envious. I can appreciate that. um, so here is the same. I think they did this trial in the same exact field, basically 2 years later. So there's probably soybean in between the corn crop we just looked at, and now there's corn again. So this was done in 2014, and we had excellent yields in 2014 here in Iowa. So this is a much different situation. We're talking about plentiful rainfall situation here. And now we're looking at the same treatments we just looked at on the last slide. And we're back in this upland soil. And in the upland soil again, they saw yield increases with the organic acid product they tested, but they did not see yield increases in either the side slope soil or the lowland soil. So in other words, when you had higher soil organic matter concentrations, they tended to see no or very small yield increases. But they did see yield increases again in that upland soil with lower soil organic matter. So that's why I've taken the time and energy to investigate products like this. So we're going to kind of transition, Dr. Godsey, into what I've done in my experiences and what I've seen. So are there any questions about what we've went over so far?
No, I don't. I don't think so. Yeah, just anxious to get into your results
Gotcha.
and treatments and
Gotcha.
see what
Gotcha.
the response is. So or
Well,
was.
I don't want to give away the secrets here, but we'll look at my results. But generally speaking, I haven't had nearly as positive results as that USDA study shows. But nevertheless, we'll get into what I did here, and we'll talk about what I found. So
Okay.
um, in 2017, I basically had about seven total trials. These were on-farm trials, and again, they're kind of scattered across our area of operation here. And I ended up with 2 soybean locations and 5 corn locations, and I'm going to focus on these 5 corn locations for today. We can briefly discuss the soybean results too if you'd like, but we're going to really focus on the 5 corn locations. Um, and I position these experiments in some different soils because that's something the USDA ARS, if you read their publication and you listen to them talk and give their presentation, they're pretty adamant that they believe in lower productivity soils, that there may be a consistent yield increase in their opinion and their experience, but maybe not so much in some higher productivity soils. So I position 2 of these on-farm experiments in what I'll call the very highly productive Iowa soils. I positioned 2 of them in some sandier loam soils. And one of the trials I positioned in a low organic matter, what I'll call timber soil. And that's a common reference used in this region for a soil that is very silty. It has a shallow E horizon, so it's kind of got a sandier, silty horizon that's 7 to 15 inches below the topsoil. Tends to be lower in organic matter and not quite as productive. Tend to hold a lot of water. So that's kind of what I'm referring to when I say timber soil. Um, and at four of five of these locations, these corn locations, I collected very intensive soil samples at each of these sites. So I think it's important also to keep in mind that these trials, I partnered with growers, customers of ours. So I'm a resource our salespeople have access to, and I get to meet a lot of our customers and talk a lot about agronomy and crop management techniques and products. And things of that nature. And farmers generally love to talk about that stuff. And that's great because I like to talk about it too. Um, and when I talk about things like this, like organic acids or humic acids, fulvic acids, when I talk to them about what I'm up to, why I'm interested in it, usually they're more than happy to partner with somebody like myself that can really guide them and help them with these trials. And so a lot of these were done with our customers on farmers' fields. Um, I physically planted all these experiments. I applied all the treatments, but the farmers actually harvested the trials. And we weighed all these trials with weigh wagons as well as collected yield monitor data just to kind of verify some of the findings and be able to delete some areas that uh, you know, may be influencing one treatment versus another. But anyway, this was really a partnership between us and our customers. Um, so these are on-farm replicated field trials, um, and just really, it's really fun to work with customers on things like this because they're just as interested as I am in a lot of cases. So what exactly did I do? I tested two different organic acid products, okay? And it's really important to understand for our discussion that I looked at the identical product the USDA looked at in these on-farm field trials. So when I refer to the USDA organic acid, I'm not telling you the product name, but I'm telling you I used the exact same product that the USDA used, okay? So I wanted to use a product that I thought had shown some promise from somebody that I could trust and count on in the past. And so that's why I selected to use the USDA organic acid product. I also used a product that I'm going to refer to as the diatom organic acid. That's not the actual product name. I have a non-disclosure agreement with the company that provided that product, so I can't use the product name, but I call it the diatom organic acid because that was the source of the organic acid. It comes from a bed of diatoms, or diatomaceous earth, people often call it, from New Zealand, actually. So this stuff was flown to the United States for us to look at in research trials. But it comes from a diatomaceous earth deposit. The USDA product actually comes from a leonardite deposit in North Dakota. So two very different sources, but yet they have similar um, characteristics, and they're both classified as organic acids. So within this study, I also had two different placements. So I applied both of these products in furrow at planting with my research planner, and then I soil surface broadcasted before planting. That was another treatment. So in other words, like you could do with residual pre-plant or pre-emergent herbicides. So those are my two application methods. Now it's also important to keep in mind that in every one of these treatments, I followed up with an early vegetative application. So not only did I have this in-furrow at planting application, but I also had the soil and the soil surface broadcast application, but everything had a foliar application. So even when I put these products in furrow, I came back and did a foliar application. And even when I broadcasted these products on the soil surface, I came back and did a foliar application. And one thing that I've started to do, right, wrong, or indifferent, is whenever I work with products and companies and I'm evaluating their products, I always try my best to use labeled rates, the highest labeled rates listed, as well as try to follow what they suggest for maximum yield all the time. So that's why I followed up with these foliar applications, because if you talk to companies that promote these products, oftentimes they want you to do a soil application and a foliar application. So that's what I did in these experiments. So I want to put the best agronomic foot forward is what it comes down to, in hopes that we can find yield increases. And then if we do, then we can start looking at, do you need the foliar application, or can you just use the foliar application, things of that nature. All products and timings were applied at 48 ounces of material per acre. So those were the application rates I used. And in each of these experimental units, so in each of these different plots here, there was intensive soil samples taken. And I looked at every major macronutrient, every major secondary nutrient and every major micronutrient, as well as some other products like CO2 evolution, and oftentimes that's referred to as the Solvita CO2 test, I think. So I wanted to know, not only I was really focused on, are these things able to increase plant mineral nutrient levels in the soil, like I've often read. Um, that's what I really wanted to understand, as well as, do these things increase yields? Okay, so before we talk about yield, which is what we're all most interested in, I just want to kind of briefly tell you what I found regarding all the soil sampling I did, and trying to answer the question, were there changes in soil mineral nutrient concentration? So generally speaking, there were not changes in soil mineral nutrient concentrations, not consistently, and not for many mineral nutrients. That being said, there was a little indication that possibly these organic acids could be making some plant mineral nutrients more plant available, okay, in the soil. So at one of my locations, we have the check treatment. So in this treatment, there were no organic acids applied. And in this treatment, we had the diatom in furrow product. That basically increased soil test potassium levels from 381 to 444 pounds per acre. Okay. And then at the Manlius, Illinois location, there was also an increase in soil test potassium levels from 109 pounds per acre to basically 160 pounds per acre. All right. So those are the only two locations that I can say with any confidence whatsoever that potassium was increased.
What was the timing of those soil samples in relation to the treatments, Jake? Was it a month after, or
Excellent question. So I applied, obviously I applied that planting treatments at planting. The foliar treatments were applied basically between about V4 and about V8 at the latest stage. And I told the intern that was collecting all these soil samples that, I said, I want you to wait a couple weeks after the last application is done, and then I want you to go take these soil samples. And he recorded the grow stage. I have to go back and look at those to tell you for sure, Dr. Godsey. But generally speaking, these soil samples were collected between approximately V8 and VT. So most of these samples were taken, within 2 to 3 to 4 weeks after the products had been applied, basically.
okay, okay, yeah, and those are interesting. The checks, some of those are really low potassium,
Correct.
potassium
Yes.
soil test
Yes.
levels.
Yes.
So
Correct. And
very
and, and
very
on
similar to what we would see in our sand. So.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Now on your silt loam soils, soil test potassium is not a problem, is it? I mean, it's generally not required, or is that? Am
No,
I incorrect
correct.
about that?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
It's usually similar to what your your top two locations are there. 300 or plus.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So in addition to potassium, I also seen statistical yielding or increases in total inorganic nitrogen, so ammonium plus nitrate. And that only happened at one location, the DeWitt site. And the DeWitt site is one of my sandy sites. And basically, total inorganic nitrogen was increased by 14.2 pounds per acre there. And that was with excuse me, that was with the diatom broadcast treatment here. And then at the DeWitt site, the USDA organic acid, when broadcasted, also increased plant available nitrogen, or I'm sorry, inorganic nitrogen by 15.3 pounds per acre. So I think it's interesting that the two broadcast treatments increased inorganic nitrogen content in the soil by about the same amount, but the in-furrow treatments did not. So I thought that was interesting. But in the grand scheme of things, even though I did measure some slight increases in soil fertility levels, of all the different plant mineral nutrients I measured, um, I cannot say I consistently seen changes in soil fertility levels with these products. So my conclusion, Go ahead, Dr. Godsey.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask you on the broadcast on the nitrogen
Hmm.
increases with those two applications. You think that's most likely due to retention of those and potentially not leaching some of that nitrate out, or I guess what's your hypothesis there?
Yeah, my speculation, um, and I've talked to some other people, and I can't say that I've read this, but I've talked to some other people in the industry that manufacture some of these products, and they've done a lot more measuring of things than I have. But I think just by understanding, kind of having a general understanding of how these products work in soils and talking to some people, I think that it's likely that these organic acids, because they're high net negative charge, are basically stripping some ammonium between some inner clay layers that would normally not be plant available, and basically bringing them into in the soil solution. And then when that happens, of course, the ammonium is transformed to nitrate nitrogen. And I think that's why you can see increases in ammonium, both ammonium and nitrate nitrogen. So I think it's just basically chelating some of these ammonium ions and
Hmm.
bringing them into the soil solution. That's my speculation, but that's
Okay.
speculation.
Okay. So most likely it would be pretty short-lived probably in a sandy soil because it's going to get converted quickly to nitrate and then the potential for leaching. So,
Correct. And I also think that, even though these are real increases in inorganic nitrogen concentration, relative to what the soil can supply from a year to year basis, particularly in a higher organic matter soil, these are really, fairly small increases in soil nitrogen levels. I mean, they're not meaningless, but they are relatively small when you really get down to it.
yeah. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so did the organic acids increase yields, corn yields, which is what we're most interested in my studies? Well, I think you can get a pretty easy look at this figure here. And so here's my check treatment. Here's the USDA broadcast treatment, USDA in-furrow treatment, diatom diatom broadcast treatment, and diatom in-furrow treatment. And as you can see, there were really few. I mean, there's no difference basically in any of these products or application timings. And this would be the average of all five of the on-farm corn sites in 2017. And not only were there not a yield increase on average, but there wasn't yield increases at productive sites. There wasn't yield increases at the sandy sites, and there wasn't a yield increase at the low organic matter timber soil sites. So my hypothesis going into this experiment was that, hey, you know what? In some of these sandy soils, in some of these low organic timber soils, maybe these organic acids could be a valuable tool for growers. But I didn't find that. So, that's this is what I found. The data is what the data is, and it clearly contradicts what the USDA found, even though I used the exact same product. And I used basically almost $20 per acre of product. So if this is a real world situation, the farmer would have been out substantial amounts of money based on my results. So I'm as disappointed as anybody that this trial didn't work out better than it did, but that's what I found. So we're going to kind of transition into my small plot trials, Dr. Godsey. So do you have any questions at this point, I guess?
No, I don't think so. I guess one quick question. What was your lowest organic matters on those sandy loam soils?
I'd have to go back and look for you, Dr. Godsey. I have that, of course, um, and I'll provide you with that information. I'm going to speculate 1.5%.
Okay.
Not under 1 to 1.5%. I'm pretty confident of that.
Okay, so that's very similar to what most of our sands. Some of our sands are around one or potentially a little under, but most of them are 1 to 1.5. So just yep, just curious. So yep, continue.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent question. All right. So next slide here. All right. So I haven't given up on these organic acids yet because even though I found what I found, I have a little bit of a hard time believing that there isn't something to them and they don't have some potential to increase crop yields. And I'm still on the train of thought that it's still worth my time investigating them. So I have continued to investigate them on a much smaller scale than in 2017. And basically, I've started evaluating them with a bunch of other potential inputs that could increase yields. Um, but anyway, so in my current investigations, I've reverted to small plot trials, and I've done that because not that I don't like working with growers, and not that I don't prefer on-farm trials, frankly. And frankly, if you put these on-farm trials in spots with low spatial variation, that they frankly can be just as good or better than small plot research in my experience. Um, but the problem is that I want to look at a bunch of different products. And when you start looking at 7 to 8 to 9, 10 products and a couple application methods, you just get so many treatments that you can't practically do it on farm, and it's just not practical for farmers to help you with it either. So I've kind of started to transition back to some small plot work for now, just to kind of try to look at many different products. And then if I do find some products that we think we're interested in selling, then we'll probably go back to doing some on-farm trials. But in this current experiment we're going to discuss here, it's in a split plot design, so it has two different application methods in it, and the main plots are the application method. So um, basically, the application method is how did I apply the liquid suspension fertilizers, and the subplots within those application methods would be a bunch of different additives that could be added potentially to liquid suspension fertilizers to increase yields. Um, The two placement methods were subsurface injection, 4 inches deep on 30-inch centers. And then I came back and planted offset that 4-inch deep fertilizer band by about 2 or 3 inches. So this application method was something similar that could be done if a guy's interested in strip tilling and injecting fertilizer simultaneously while he strip tills. And then he would come back and plant, closely associated with that fertilizer band. So that's kind of trying to emulate that practice. And then the other application method was what we call a surface dribble band. So commercially, we surface dribble band a lot of these liquid suspensions on 15-inch centers on the soil surface, and the grower may or may not incorporate that fertilizer with tillage. I had this at 3 sites, 2 in eastern Iowa and 1 in northwest Illinois. And now, unlike my on-farm experiments we just discussed, where I kind of selected some environments, all these soils here, all 3 of these soils are highly productive prairie soils, and there were 6 replications per site. So it's really a pretty robust data set I'm going to show you here, just because I replicated this 6 times at a site. And I focused on highly productive soils because the truth is that's most of what we operate in here. I mean, we're very fortunate to have lots of highly productive soils. And even though I selected some different soils from my last experiment, that's really a pretty small percentage of the soils that we operate in. So everything you see here in the next slide was done in highly productive, what I'll call high organic matter prairie soils. Any questions about how that was done, Dr. Godsey, or is that clear?
Nope, I think pretty clear.
Okay, good deal. Okay, so we're gonna cut to the chase here, and I didn't collect a bunch of soil information or tissue analysis or tissue samples or anything like that. Basically, I was just interested in measuring yield in this study. And I had a couple organic acids in this trial, but I also had some other products. But the 2 organic acids that I had in this trial was this Brentag organic acid, and I had a product called Hydrahume, which I think is kind of widely known and probably used. But this Brentag organic acid is not commercially available. It's something that I've partnered with a company to try to help custom develop, so to speak, for us. So the Brentag organic acid did increase yields by 3.46 bushels per acre. in these small plot trials, and statistically that was pretty significant. But kind of the unfortunate part up to this point is that the product costs $10 an acre, so in reality it would only return the farmer about $2.1 per acre or so. So averaged over the 3 locations, it did increase yields. And I should have mentioned this prior to discussing this slide, but I told you I had different application methods in this experiment, and I did. But statistically, there was no difference in the application methods between all these products. So therefore, I averaged everything over the application method. So I'm showing you I'm showing you the data here that's averaged over the 2 application methods. So averaged over the 2 application methods and across these 3 sites, this organic acid did increase yields, but the hydrohume organic acid did not. And it still cost $10 an acre approximately. So, you were looking at a net negative there. And the only 2 products out of all these products that actually statistically increased yields was this product manufactured by Terramax. It's a bacterial inoculant. It's a couple infixing bacteria as well as a couple bacteria that, according to the product manufacturer, can solubilize phosphorus in the soil that's not plant available. So it can basically make non-plant available phosphorus more plant available. So that product did increase yields, and so did the Brentag organic acid, but none of the other products in the trial did. So a few concluding remarks. All in all, even though I did have some limited success in these small plot trials with organic acids, we have personally not had, wide scale, consistent yield increases, particularly yield increases that tend to be profitable for farmers. And I'm a little bit concerned about repeatability with these products still to this point. So I'm gonna continue looking at a couple organic acids in future research trials. But I think that our company in particular has been a pretty conservative company. And prior to myself, we had an individual in my position before I came. He's since retired. That he did a good job at evaluating different products and practices. And we've always been conservative, and we've always wanted to make sure that products that we promote and sell, unless it's general herbicides and things of that nature, but any of these types of products that are a little bit unconventional, we've done a pretty good job of at evaluating them in science-based field trials. And it's pretty important that we can show our customers profitability in local plots that have been designed correctly. And we personally just aren't there yet with organic acids. So we don't feel that organic acids have met the level of confidence in our mind that this is something we're going to sell. But haven't given up on them, so I'm going to continue to look at them in future field trials. And for the grower, I'm even more concerned than for us. I mean, I work with a lot of these companies. I feel like I've weeded out the companies that probably don't have products that are somewhat, return consistent yield increases. I've done a good job at kind of getting down to the people who do the actual science in the labs and talking to the researchers that I feel are kind of giving me the straight story. And that's why I'd be concerned if I was a farmer, because that's taken some time for me to do. And I get the feeling that for every one product out there, and this could be said for kind of generally speaking regarding a lot of these different biological products especially, I get the feeling for every one product out there that's been legitimately proven in field studies, there's probably 5 more that haven't met that level of proof, in my opinion. So there's lots of products out there, lots of people selling products like this, and that's a concern I have for the farmer, just plain and simple. And I don't have an answer for you, but that is a concern I have. I also have a concern by the lack of regulation around these organic acid products. I don't try to get these products labeled, so I'm not an expert when it comes to the level of proof that you need to get a product label for things like this. But from what I understand, the level of it's not hard to get these products, get a label put on them. So it's hard to say what's in the jug in a lot of cases. And I also think that based on a lot of reading done, the source, or more importantly, the specific fraction of humic and fulvic acids, really seem to dictate some of the plant physiological responses that I've seen in some research studies. And particularly when it comes to that increase in root development that I mentioned, or the increase in root length that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, it seems like there's some really specific fractions of humic and fulvic acids that cause that response to happen. And if you're not using those specific fractions, then you're not going to get that. So that's another concern. And when I say fractions, I mean a specific fraction of humic and or fulvic acids. So you can't just call something a humic or fulvic acid or organic acid and expect it's going to do anything. It looks like it needs to be a specific fraction of those products. And lastly, I'll say, it never hurts to try products. I can't tell farmers not to try products because that's what I do for a living. And frankly, that's what I'm very passionate about. In fact, I encourage farmers to try products. But I really do believe that good guidance on how to test products is really key. Yeah, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but you can't just split an 80 and apply a product on this half and apply a product on that half. You're just not going to get the answer, the real answer you need to get to make some fairly large financial decisions in my mind. Just because there's a lot of spatial variation between one half of a field and another, you really need to partner with somebody who understands how to design these trials, and or if you have a good understanding of it yourself, that's fine. Precision ag technologies are making it a lot easier to evaluate products like this. So I think that precision ag is really going to help us and farmers evaluating products on their own in a way that can provide them good answers. And I think my last comment would be, I think it's really important to partner with people you can trust and that have your best interest in mind. And, Dr. Godsey, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I wish that our two organizations were, geographically closer, because we are evaluating a lot of these products and these practices. And that's something that we really do want to do. We want to provide products that can really help our customers. And we're doing a good job of evaluating them. So I wish we were geographically closer, but I'll tell your customers it's really important that they partner with somebody locally that they do have a lot of trust in. That's really, really, really key. So that would be what I have for you. But I can imagine there could be several questions that you may have about my trials.
Yeah, I think one of my questions, I think, kind of from a farmer's perspective, in trying to evaluate or decipher, and I guess identify that 1 out of 5 products that may provide a consistent response. What you look, and you mentioned it already about the labels, and I've seen labels that don't even necessarily specify the fraction of fulvic and humic. But I guess looking at um, a label perspective, when you're trying to farmers trying to evaluate products, what are do you have any advice there, or things to look for in trying to decipher what product may be better than another?
I don't know that I have any just grandiose advice that's going to make the farmer's ability to select products easier. But I'll tell you some things that I've seen that concern me. I would focus on when you're talking to somebody that's selling these products, I would focus on a couple things. I would focus on, um, I would look at the label, and I'll give you an example. There's one product that one of our salesmen sent me the other day. The rate per acre was 4 ounces per acre that this company wanted you to apply, and the humic acid concentration in this stuff was 1.5%. So you're going to apply 4 ounces of a product at 1.5% humic acid concentration. I just don't see how that's enough material on a per acre basis to do anything. Um, and sometimes I feel that's a technique to basically make the margin higher on these products. If you kind of dilute these products down, then you can make more margin. That's one thing that I worry about. And I've had some product manufacturers tell me that their competition's doing. So that worries me. When you're looking at these really low use rates and then a 1.5 or 2% organic matter humic acid concentration, that's one thing to look for. I'll give you a little bit of an example. That Brentag organic acid product that I looked at that I showed you did increase yields.
Hmm.
It had a it has a concentration of about 10 to 12% humic acid in it, and I was applying. I'd have to go back and look, but about 64 ounces of material per acre. So I'm applying a lot higher rates, and the concentration of humic acids in that product is much higher. And it did increase yields in my studies so far. I don't know how consistent it will be, but that's one thing I would focus on. I would look at the use rates, and I would look at the just how much humic acid would be in these products. That's one thing I would tell you. The other thing I would tell you, I would pay attention to the salesman's lingo. If there's wild promises being made, that's a red flag. If there isn't local plot data that they can share, um, if they say, this research is done in Arizona or California or Mexico, or even Iowa in your case, those are different places and different yield environments and different precipitation regimes. I really think that these products really need to be proven in some local environments. Um, I really do. So that's a couple things I would watch out for. I would watch out for kind of wild claims, locally proven plot work, um, as well as if you can apply this stuff at any stage, in any way, in any application method at any stage. I just don't think it's that simple. I don't think that you can apply these products at any time, um, of the year and in every application method and think they're going to increase yields. That's just another red flag I would watch out for if I were a farmer.
Okay, that's good advice. Yeah, pay attention to the concentration of those acids, and definitely that's, yeah. Like you said, you examples you gave. Can see a wide range from 1.5 to 10%. And when you figure that on a per acre basis, it makes a big difference. But
Yeah, absolutely.
and I guess I agree. I guess from anecdotally from what we've seen, in our region, is that excuse me, the consistency of response is what we're lacking. And perhaps it's just we don't really fully understand the mechanisms yet, like you kind of referred to, and then and maybe a lot of it has to do with application timing. But yeah, the consistency of response we've really struggled with, and I guess our advice in the past has been, if you're dead set on spending that money, it may be better suited for additional fertilizer. It has kind of been our take, but until we fully understand and can identify when we do get responses. So,
Yeah, and I would mirror your comments about the fertilizer in general. I mean, there are different land tenure situations which change this philosophy quite a bit. So I'm kind of focusing when I say this on owned property. Um, we know that potassium fertilizer, for example, and phosphorus fertilizer, for example, we have clear proof that, in many cases, when it's required, those products increase yields. And if you're on owned land, they can, as long as they're not super sandy, that they can store those nutrients as well. So I think before you go to products like these, and before you go to different products that aren't proven, you really need to make sure that a lot of your other management is up to snuff, like soil fertility, like weed management. Things that we know, the tried and true agronomic practices that increase yields. I think if those aren't being maximized, I'd focus there first, because I am concerned about the consistency also with these products. And yeah, I think that's just good sound advice, Dr. Godsey.
All right, Dr. Vossenkemper, I think we'll go ahead and conclude the presentation. We're right at an hour, so we thank you for your time. And do you have contact information
Yes, I
for any
do.
guys?
That's a
Okay.
great question. So my email has been at the bottom of this these slides pretty much continuously throughout. So it's jpv at liquidgrow.com. The Our web page, I have a blog that I write on every once in a while. You can go to liquidgrow.com for some more trials that I've done looking at different products and practices. And my cell phone number is 563 320 3623 if you have any additional questions about the topic covered today.
All right. Well, thank you, and we will go ahead and conclude the presentation.
Yeah, that sounds great, Dr. Godsey. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for your customers' times as well. Thank you much. Bye bye.
This presentation was sponsored by Precision Crop Management, which is a part of Godsey Precision Ag. If you're interested in irrigation scheduling through Precision Crop Management, please give Godsey Ag a call. Thank you.